In all things according to yourself, pattern of good works, in teaching, uncorruptness, gravity, a sound word not to be condemned, that he who opposes opposed may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say about us. Okay. When God calls us each to do our own thing, sometimes one is called to teach. Sometimes one is just called to give words of encouragement. Sometimes one's called to be a servant in the church and do things that no one else wants to do. We need to pride ourselves in fulfilling what the Lord wants us to do. We need to take what He's called us to do and do it with our best initiative. Be dedicated, be committed to it, and realize that we ain't doing it for any one person necessarily. We're doing it for Him. It may not be the most esteemed job. It may not be necessarily what we want to do, but it's what He wants us to do, and that's what matters the most. We may necessarily not get gratitude. Remember, most of the prophets, they were called by God, but sometimes some of them were hated. Yet they were still called by God, and they did what they were called to do. And then there's a prophet like Jonah who was called to do something, but he didn't want to do it. And so there'll be them instances. We should stay true. Teachers should stay true to the Word. When they go off from the Word, that's when they start getting in the areas they need not to be getting into. When they pattern off what people think instead of what the Word says. Too many times a day, that's what we're getting into in certain churches. We're getting, well, this makes this person feel this way, so we're not teaching this anymore. Well, that person just needs to be offended and stay true to the Word. Maybe they need to be offended. Because there has to be a humbling to come to Jesus. You can't be all prideful. Sometimes that has to be done through offending people. Yes. Yes, and it's getting to the point. Certain churches are trying to get rid of the conviction feeling. So without the conviction, how are you supposed to come to Jesus? Because you don't know you need to have a need for Him without the conviction. So that's where some churches are messing up today, because they're taking away from certain teachings. They ain't getting the Spirit ain't convicting people. So they're missing out on the church growing as a whole. They may have numbers because they may have a message people want, but them numbers sadly ain't hearing the truth. Bondmen should be subject to their own masters, to make themselves acceptable in everything, not contradicting. Now today, we don't got slaves. No, we might have some underground type things, workers, but we don't outwardly have slaves in this country. So I think this can apply to workers too. The Christian attitude should go to the workforce. You as a Christian worker should do what you can do, not even necessarily when they're watching you. It should be that the boss turns around, he knows you're going to do what you're supposed to do. Our Christian life should reflect in all spaces of our life, including work. We should be honest and trusting at work, just as much as we are in the church. Yeah, we should even more out in the world, because then them are the people that need Christ the most, the ones out in the world. Not robbing their masters, but showing all good fidelity. that they may adorn the teaching which is our Savior God in all things. You hear about all these things, money laundering. This person was taking so much money each time and hiding it away. We as Christians should be able to be trusted with money. If something comes up missing, we should be the last person they go to because they know we wouldn't be the one taking it. We should come up with this image. Because if we don't have a good image with the world, we ain't going to win them to Christ, most likely. Now, this ain't going to say everybody's going to love us, because Jesus was hated. But those who actually respected the Word, they hated him for certain things. And that hate grew into hating him for feeding these and healing these people. But then there was those that may have not accepted who he was, but accepted him as a great teacher, and accepted him as a healer. Now, them people were wrong, but it just shows that the world sometimes will respect people and Christians, even though they don't accept what they're believing. They'll accept the fact that they're living up to it. Now, the ones that are hate Christians, they'll wait and look at them and be like, wait for them to mess up. And that's why we'll mess up, but we should try not to. Because there are certain people, and when we do mess up, we need to come back to Him as soon as possible. That way there's nobody pointing at us saying, I thought you were supposed to be a Christian. And because them people who are hate Christians are just looking for us to mess up. Now, I say there's people who just stood around watching Jesus, seeing if he'd mess up, to say something. Because the case they held him against wasn't a very strong case. The only reason Rome went through with it is because they figured they'd be a riot. No. The only thing the Jews had, really, was the fact that he did works on the Sabbath, and he proclaimed to be God, but he was God. So they knew which the Sabbath thing, he didn't actually break the Bible, he just broke their traditions. Because he didn't go out and do something, go fishing on Saturday or something with Peter. They were in the synagogue and they came out and he healed somebody. And the law there was written, you can't go out and make your occupation. So Peter, if he's going out fishing Saturday, that would have been breaking that. But Jesus healing people wasn't. And they couldn't see that because of their hatred. For the grace of God which carries with it salvation for all men has appeared. This is why we should set an example. Christ ain't in this world physically today. It's just spiritual and fills the Spirit. The church is in a way the physical embodiment of Christ. And it should live as Christ would. Because the world isn't going to see Christ if the church isn't acting like Him. They'll just see a corrupt church. Yes. For some people, we're the only Christ they'll ever see until judgment. Teaching us that have denied empathy and worldly lust, we should live soberly, justly, piously in the present course of all things, awaiting the blessed hope of appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. So we should live in a way. I just covered that though. But as long as we're here, we should live in this way. We shouldn't give up hope just because we're old and think time's done. Because if our time was over, He'd just call us home. Because He'd rather have us there. But if we're here, He still has some purpose for us. Something He still wants us to do. Now that purpose may be simply as easy as just being there and cheering people up just by being there. Just knowing that you're committed and up by that uplifting people. It don't have to be something off. It don't have to be something really, like going up and it could be something simple. Yes. It's because usually I think God understands when people get older, they ain't able to do as much, and He understands that, and I don't think He expects as much out of them when they get older. But they're here for a reason. It could just be for somebody to go talk to them. And sometimes it could be for those that are upcoming to go see their needs, meet them. Who gave Himself for us that we might redeem from our own lawlessness and purify to Himself a particular people, zealous for good works. Now, Jesus never died for the saint. Without Jesus, there is no saints. Jesus died for the sinner. This particular people here, it ain't the Jewish people. This particular people is the church. Those that are coming to faith or those that have come to faith. God knows who's going to come to faith. Man don't. We as Christians should treat everybody as if they're going to come to faith, if they haven't already. We should do what we can to make that happen, as long as the Lord leads. Sometimes the Lord will have us stop, that way the next person can come along. These things speak and exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one despise you. And the word should be audible when it's before other people. It ain't wrong to read the word silently, but there's something about it coming out verbally and being audible. Exhort. This is to encourage. The word can both be encouraging and to rebuke somebody. It can both be, both are to bring them to where they need to be. Sometimes people need to be rebuked for what they're doing to bring them back to where they need to go. And sometimes they're already on the right course and they need to be encouraged. So at the same time, the Word can do this both. From certain passages, depending on where your aspect is, this is why people get different things out of different passages. It's based on where they're going through at the time. Now some passages are just encouraging. And then some passages are just rebuking. And this church balances it. Some churches just use the ones that are encouraging and that's it. I don't know of any churches that just use the ones rebuking, but they might use it in before the altar call, use that. But usually, some people don't want to always be beaten down. But sometimes people need it. Because we got to be beaten down to be humbled. Sometimes that pride He has to take away that pride by tearing us down so we can trust in Him and not in ourselves. That's why humility is important. Because if we weren't humble, we would trust in ourselves and have boasting and all this stuff. Because we would, without knowing we need Him, we can't have Him.